Hi, and welcome to Determining Your Career Path, where I'm going to tell you a bit about product management. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Laura Kirsop. I've got 10 years' experience making products in EdTech. I was director of product at FutureLearn, which is an online courses marketplace and one of Europe's biggest EdTech companies. I was head of product at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, which is a charity that empowers young people to make things with technology. And now I consult through my own company, which is called 1870 Education. And in a previous life before product, I was a primary school teacher that specialized in computing. So I'm going to talk you through 5 different things today. So I'm going to start by talking about product management. What is it? I'm going to tell you what I think the characteristics of effective product managers are. I'm going to discuss how the role varies from company to company and team to team. I'm going to talk you through a day in the life of a product manager. And then finally, I'll discuss how to tell whether it's the right job for you. So I saw this quote on LinkedIn the other day, and I thought it summed up product management really nicely. Product management is the art, science, and practice of making successful products and making products successful. And when I stumbled into product 10 years ago, it was quite opaque and hard to understand from the outside what it actually was. But now I feel like we're gaining more of a shared understanding across the discipline about what product management is. And it's becoming a bit more formalized. So it's actually a really great time to join the profession. And we've seen the demand for product managers sharply increasing across all sectors. And the salaries are really great. The average product manager salary in London is reported by Glassdoor as being 57k. And the more entry-level associate PM role is almost 37k. But what is product management? How do you make successful products or make products more successful? The way I like to summarize it is that you're constantly taking in and creating insight as inputs. And as the product manager, it's your job to understand these and rationalize them and drive action. And so the inputs you take in include things like customer insight, market insight, competitor analysis, business priorities, and also stakeholders' opinions. And then, informed by those inputs, you instigate a variety of different actions, such as user research, solving problems, designing, experimenting, and iteratively building new features and products. And in the process of doing these actions or these activities, you're discovering new things which become inputs, and then the loop goes back round again. But importantly, you, as the product manager, are working every day with people from other disciplines who also really care about making the product successful. So product management is often referred to as a team sport. You'll usually lead and collaborate day to day with a multidisciplinary team that includes designers, software engineers, user researchers, and data scientists. And you'll also work closely with other stakeholders, such as marketeers or salespeople. Now, in EdTech, I most frequently collaborate with education specialists because a huge part of making a successful product in EdTech is making sure that the product actually helps people to learn things. But even though it's a team sport, the product manager is super important. They are fundamental to bringing everything and everyone together in order to make the product successful. And having managed product managers and seen many in action, I would say there are some common characteristics of those that are particularly good. Firstly, they are very empathetic to their team and stakeholders and their users. Secondly, they are able to build a coherent picture or story out of insight. They can drive decision-making in ambiguous or chaotic situations. They are clear communicators that can influence people of all different levels. And finally, they can adapt well to changes and to new situations. Now, whilst there is growing consensus about what product management is as a discipline, the role does vary depending on the organization or even what team you're in. So, I'm going to talk through each of these factors in turn. So, firstly, the role often shifts depending on the people available in the team or the level of skill that they have. So, for example, you'll have to lean more heavily into the design process if you're working with a junior designer. Or if you're working in a team that doesn't have a user researcher, you and the product designer will need to collaborate to get this type of work done. Another factor that really affects the role is the sector that you work in. I think one of the really great things is that there are product managers working across all different sectors. So, just in ed tech alone, I've worked in a commercial for profit company, the public sector, and the third sector in an education charity. And all of these different types of organizations have different motivations and different definitions of what success looks like. So, for example, in commercial companies, they are generally optimizing their products for growth and for revenue. In publicly funded companies or organizations, they are looking to cut costs or increase access to services. And in charities, they're usually looking to have a tangible impact on their beneficiaries. There are also product-led companies in different industries, and this will affect what the role looks like day to day. So, for example, in fintech or financial tech, you have challenger banks like Monzo and Starling. And in health tech, you have organizations like Babylon Health or Unmind. And some of these companies are B2C, which means they're selling to consumers, and others will be B2B, which means they're selling to businesses. And all of these different industries will have different customer insight, market insight, and regulations driving them, which can mean the sorts of inputs you're taking in as a product manager are different. And so inevitably, the solutions that you're designing and building are different too. I think the fact that the role is available across different industries makes it possible to identify your own interests and perhaps look to your previous experience and seek an organization in an industry that aligns with them. Another factor that affects the product role is the maturity of the product that you're working on. So, products vary in terms of where they are in the product life cycle. So, some products are in the process of being conceived and introduced to the market, while others might have been around for ages and be huge legacy products that are in more of a maintenance and iteration mode. And the sorts of activities you'll do as a product manager will vary depending on the stage of the product. So, for example, if you're introducing a new product to the market, you'll be working closely with your colleagues from a variety of disciplines to define and design the proposition from scratch. And this might involve things like creating prototypes and minimum viable products to test with customers. But if you're working on an established product, you'll be improving parts of it incrementally or perhaps retiring features that users no longer need. One of the things that I think affects the role most is the size of the company. So if you're a PM working in an earlier stage small startup, you might be the only PM and report directly into the CEO. But if you're in a large company, you might have multiple layers of product management like this. Now, bigger organizations are more likely to take on junior or associate PMs because they'll have lots of people and time to support them. And as a product manager in a large company, your role might be more focused than the PM at the startup, but you would also have more colleagues to learn from and perhaps more chance for promotion into those senior positions in the hierarchy. And lots of larger companies also have specialist product roles, such as growth PM, who are specifically skilled in growing the user base of products, or technical PMs, who are PMs that have a higher degree of technical knowledge and therefore work on more technical problems and solutions. So, as you can see from my tour of all these factors, the product role can really vary from company to company or even team to team. And the variety is a really huge bonus because it means you can choose organizations that reflect your values, your interests, and your skills. And when you start to work in a new organization, there's always a lot to learn, which means you're constantly evolving your skill set. Now, before I became a PM, I read everything I could find about product management, but I still couldn't picture it. And it wasn't until I shadowed a product manager in action that I really understood what the job involved. So in order to bring it to life, I want to show you what a day in the life of a product manager might look like. So you are very likely to start every day in a quick meeting called a stand-up with your team. And in this meeting, you'll look at your work board, discuss what work your team have completed, what's in progress, and what's coming up next. And it's a really good way to check in with each other and make sure that everyone has what they need to progress well in their day. And after the stand-up, I find it's usually a really good moment to spend time with your team members on anything that needs urgent attention. So, for example, you and a data scientist might spend time with one of the engineers to get their input on an experiment that you're planning. Later in the morning, you might have a meeting with the other product managers and your boss. And in this meeting, you'll look at the strategic goals and plans for the quarter, discuss how things are progressing overall, and make any necessary adjustments to future plans. Your boss might also update you on what's been happening at a more senior level in the company. And afterwards, you'll likely share some of this information that you've learned with your team and feed it into your plans. At 12 p.m., you might really dig into your Slack and email messages. There will be many, especially if you're in a large company, and make sure that you've answered everything. This is a sort of time where you might get a message from somebody, for example, in marketing, and that message might be better solved in person. So you might jump on a quick call to explain something to them about a feature you're releasing and how it should be communicated to users. You'll also need to draft your bi-weekly updates to share with senior stakeholders, which highlight to them what progress you've been making in a team and alert them to any risks or blockers that you might have identified. And after lunch in the afternoon, you might collaborate with your user researcher on some user interviews, which are taking place throughout the week. Now, usually the user researcher will have planned the session and lead the interview whilst you observe and take notes. And it's a really good opportunity to understand, in this instance, how a solution the team has come up with lands with users. And the insight you learn will be used to adapt designs ahead of the engineers starting to build something in the coming weeks. So you'll be able to put what you learn into action really quickly. At 3 p.m., you've just finished the interview and you go back to your desk, but you see a message from the designer in your team, and she wants to grab you to talk through something that she's figuring out. So you look together at some user flows she's drawn up in order to work out how to simplify a part of the user experience on your product. And together you work out a way to make it even simpler. And then the designer will take the action to talk it through with the software engineering lead to see if it makes sense from a technical perspective. And finally, at 4 p.m., you have a regular meeting that happens every 2 weeks called Backlog refinement. And this is a chance for the whole team to get together and review user stories on your backlog board. You might deep dive into a few stories that are important to get done soon and iron out some of the details with the engineers, making sure that the stories are at the top of the list for them to be picked up. And you'll make sure that the engineers understand the rationale behind the stories, including sharing developing insights from user research. So after seeing a day in the life, what do you think? Is product management for you? As you can see from my walkthrough of a day, it's definitely busy. Your day is never, ever boring. It's also highly collaborative. As I said before, product management is a team sport. So you'll spend almost all of your day in meetings and collaborating with other people. It's also incredibly varied. So every day you do a mixture of strategic and tactical and reactive work. I think it's incredibly mentally stimulating. There's always lots of problems to solve and connections to make between things. And finally, for all of that hard work, you are rewarded. It is well paid. Good product managers are in demand, and I've seen the salary growth over the last few years, and it's been really astonishing. So I hope that I've given you a good insight into product management as a career. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you at the QA session on the 3rd of August. And if you have any questions for me and the other guests, please submit them in the link in the email.